Welcome to Genesis Unleashed, where we unleash the truth of Genesis.
On today's episode, we ask, what's information and where did it come from?
Welcome to Genesis Unleashed. Today we're going to talk about information. Information is a fascinating topic. It's something that has provided a subject area of, just a tremendous subject area for the advancement of creationist thinking and in proving that there's a God as much as you can prove such an idea.
Right. Yeah, this is a very hard concept for atheists and evolutionists to explain, right? The concept of information. And we hear that term all the time. You might hear, in the computer, if you work in the computer industry or something like that. But we hear that term all the time. And of course, when you're talking about living things and where did they come from, we hear the term biological information. So can we make, analogies, etc.? That's what we're going to be looking into here.
Yeah, so first we need to define our terms. What is information? Right. And we can look at different things like, first, if you have a rock face, you can see a rock face there, or you have rock faces like on Mount Rushmore.
Right.
There's more information. There's information in those rock faces that is not in the rock face.
Right. So rock doesn't contain information, naturalistic rock. It had to be added to that matter in order for there to be that information in the past. And you can do the same thing. You think about a boomerang, right? You got a returning boomerang. Obviously, somebody took a tree, carved that tree, into a smaller portion, a piece of wood, and then, trees do not contain information for weapons that can return when you hurl them. So somebody added information to that piece of matter.
Turning a lizard into a bird. That's another example. Now we're talking about biological information, where you have information in a lizard that is the instruction code, talking about DNA here, the instruction code in a lizard to build a lizard. A lizard doesn't have the genetic information to build feathers, for example, that birds have. So in the evolutionary scenario, if lizards evolved into birds or some type of reptile evolved into a bird, new information would have had to have been added that lizards don't have, that birds do.
Now, of course, when you're talking about atheistic evolution, that there is no God, there's no creator, no intelligent design. Not only do you have to account for increases of information that weren't there before, you have to actually account for information itself as an entity, right? So let's go through this. I mean, information isn't something most people encounter in studies a lot. There was a brilliant man named Claude Shannon. He's an American mathematician, mathematical engineer, and he's considered the founding father of electronic communications, really, because he really studied information. He wanted to learn, well, how can we make information easier to package and send and so on. And so most people, if they've thought of information theory, Claude Shannon comes to mind. But when he was talking about information, you're trying to define this term, he was interested in statistical amounts of information. For example, how do you make that smaller? How can you, transmit it easier? I mean, if I take my keyboard and I press the letter A and I just hold it down for 3 hours and then I print that off, what I just held down for 3 hours, statistically, I'm going to have a ton of information, but dynamically, I have very little. What's that communicating, right? And then so you hear, for example, some of the intelligent design group, they will talk about, complexity, right? Complexity of things. I could take the English alphabet. Well, it's complex, right? It's very specific complexity. But if you just have it sitting there, it's not really giving you a lot of information.
Okay, maybe you could repeat it over and over again, get as many letters, the 26 letters repeated over and over again to equal the number of A's that you have.
Right.
It's different.
It's different, it's specified, it's complex.
Right.
But where we really see information at its highest level is when you take some of those letters and you actually create a message with them using it as a language, as a code system. And it's at that point that information reaches its highest level of complexity and usefulness.
Yeah. So there are different levels, different ways we can recognize and measure information. And here are the 5 basic levels of information. Statistics, first of all, that's the amount of data. It's like Calvin's analogy of all the A's on the page. Cosyntax, that's a new word actually.
That's a created word actually. It's a newer created word.
It's a combination of code and syntax. So cosyntax, and that's syntax, of course.
Right.
That's the next level of information. That would be like the alphabet.
Right,
type of thing.
Because in our code system, English language that we're using right now, for example, syntax, we don't use words like, or letters like Q and Z together. QZT, you never see that in an English word. There are other words that go together, like Q and U, for example, is very common.
Right.
So
we're talking about information at that level then.
Right. How do you use those specific letters? Yeah.
Then there's semantics. That's the meaning of the actual letters. Then there's pragmatics. That's the action that you can get from that code.
Right.
And the highest level of information is purpose. You understand, okay, this is a message, it serves a purpose, there's something that's going to happen.
There was an overall reason why the information
was transmitted.
Exactly. Now, what's very interesting, of course, is DNA, the language of life it's called, shows all 5 levels of information that you just repeated there.
Okay, so we have a complex code of biological information
that's right,
that determines how living things run.
It's not called the language of life, by accident or just because it's convenient or whatever. You will see, for example, even Bill Gates, he said, well, DNA is like the most complex code system we've ever seen. He says it's like a computer program, except far more sophisticated than anything we've ever created. Now, there's actually been some evolutionists criticize the use of Bill Gates using that term. They said, well, he's a really smart guy, but for him to just quote this, I mean, he's not an expert in biological information, he's not a biologist, etc. Well, the thing is, the reason why Bill uses analogies like that is because he is a pretty bright guy, and he's probably reading some scientific journals. I've got a quote here saying that it actually is like a digital code, and this is taken from Nature magazine, and this is what Leroy Hood and David Gallus said. The title of their article was "The Digital Code of DNA," and they said DNA is 2 types of digital information: the genes that encode proteins, which are the molecular machines of life, and the gene regulatory networks that specify the behavior of genes. So guess what? DNA is a code. It's referred to as a digital code by many scientists who are looking at the properties and the mechanisms that are utilized in there. So,
all right, yeah, and even secularists like Paul Davies said this about information. How did stupid atoms spontaneously write their own software? Nobody knows. There's no known law of physics able to create information from nothing.
Wow. Now, he's no friend to creationists or intelligent design advocates, etc.
No.
But he's admitting there's no known law of physics. So if somebody says to you, oh yeah, well, we know how life started. Sorry, because all life that we've examined has biological information in it. So you need to account for that to account for first life. So information theory, if you're looking for an expert area or a person to go to, I would recommend this man here, Professor Werner Gitt. Werner has written 2 books on information. The first one was called In the Beginning Was Information. It was just a landmark piece of work in this area. And then, of course, his follow-up is called Without Excuse. Now, Professor Gitt, he's retired now, but he was a director and professor at the German Federal Institute of Physics and Technology and the head of the Department of Information Technology. And I'd like to read 3 quotes from Dr. Gitt from his original book, In the Beginning Was Information, just to give you an idea of what he talked about information, this concept, as an expert in this field. And then we can compare that and ask some interesting questions afterwards. But let's just look at this. Dr. Gitt said that information is non-material. That means information is not derived from matter, but it requires material media for storage and transmission. Second quote, information is not life, but the information in cells is essential for all living beings. Information is a necessary prerequisite for life. Okay, so no information, no life. Third quote, life is non-material. and it is not information. But both entities, matter and information, are essential for life. So the point being here is Dr. Gitt has said information does not emanate from a material cause. Of course, atheists would like to challenge that.
Right. Well, atheists, if you're coming from the atheist perspective, it's matter and energy. That's all you've got, and huge amounts of time. Matter and energy are supposed to be responsible for everything. Now we've just read from an information expert that information is a non-material type of phenomena.
Right.
And yet atheists say things like this. Here's Richard Lewontin. It is not that the methods and institutions of science somehow compel us to accept a material explanation of the phenomenal world, but on the contrary, that we are forced by our a priori adherence to material causes to create an apparatus of investigation and a set of concepts that produce material explanations, no matter how counterintuitive, no matter how mystifying to the uninitiated. Moreover, that materialism is absolute, for we cannot allow a divine foot in the door. There's an interesting quote.
That sounds a little biased, doesn't it?
So he's already going to censor out any conclusions about explanations about how we got here that don't have materialistic, that don't have a materialistic basis.
Right. So he's saying, well, I'm an atheist. I don't want to believe in God. I don't want to have a divine foot in the door. But he's saying everything must be derived from matter. But Gitt puts this straightforward challenge forward, saying, wait a sec, information is in all living things. It's a prerequisite for life, and it's non-material. So let's take a look at that. Who's right? Well, you're going to see a picture here of a little furry little creature. And you see CAT there. As soon as you see that written down, you probably get that image in your head of this fuzzy little creature, but there's actually no relationship between CAT and this thing we know of as a cat. CAT is representative of the physical object that's there, but there's no direct connection. It's all symbolic.
Right.
Right? And that symbolism takes place in a mind, in an intelligent mind that knows that code. Because if you don't know that code, for example, if it's CHAT, well, we're in Canada here, so we've got a bilingual country, right? We've got two official languages. But I could change that into gato, right? That's Spanish. It symbolizes the same creature. It's a totally different language system. So first thing you need to know about information is it's symbolic. There's no direct link between matter and the thing that you're talking about here.
Yeah.
For example, here's another thing about information. Let's say we're working on a presentation and you finish it and you take a blank CD and you stick it in your computer. There's no information on it. And then you download whatever you're working on, the project, onto the CD. You pull out the CD. Is the CD any heavier? No, right? It's the arrangement of the little electromagnetic,
the pits on the disc that the laser reads.
They've changed. But it's not heavier. I mean, does your head get heavier when you think of a new idea? I mean, it feels like that sometimes. But, so it's not matter. You're not creating matter to create energy. I mean, example I like to use is, let's say we had a chalkboard here, right? And I took a piece of chalk and I wrote on the chalkboard, "Hi, my name is Cal. This is Richard beside me." Now, if you were looking at the information on the board and you said, well, where did the information come from? It wouldn't make sense to say, well, it came from chalk. Because if I wipe off all the chalk and I just have the chalk in my hand here, is there any information in chalk? There's no information in chalk.
No, certainly not your name.
Right?
Yeah, information is non-material.
Right.
It's not based in
hopefully
matter.
An intelligent mind made the information. The information actually emanated from a thinking mind using matter spelled out in a certain code that was created by an intelligent mind. So information always has been shown to come from a mind. If we're walking down a beach and you look down the sand and it says, Johnny loves Susie, scrawled in the sand. Would it make any sense to go, hey, look what the wind and the tide brought in? That would not be an intelligent conclusion.
we quoted from Dr. Gitt, who's an information expert, but all of us know that information comes from intelligence through everyday experience, like the example you just gave. When you walk along a beach, you recognize the structures in the sand that the waves will make and information.
Right.
And information comes from intelligence. Everyone knows that. It's just part of our common experience.
That's right. So we're not talking about when when we're discussing this in a origins debate, creation versus evolution, etc., people can't turn to us and say, well, yeah, but there might have been some way we don't know of. It's like, well, if you want to argue like that, that's fine. It's completely by faith. You've never observed it once. If you want to talk about science, which is what most people want to talk about when well, there's no God and science proves this and all that. Okay, well, if you want to go by science, what we've actually observed in our experiences, we win. That's the bottom line.
There's nothing terribly profound with what we're saying here. Information comes from intelligence. We all recognize that. So when we look at living things and we see the huge amounts of complex coded information in living things, it's a natural scientific conclusion that there was an intelligence there at the beginning to program all of that information into every group of living things in the beginning. It's a natural, it's a very scientific conclusion based on what we have discovered about information today.
Exactly. So any one of the codes we see, you think of something like Braille, for example. That's a different type of code.
Okay, yeah, it's not writing.
It's raised bumps is what it is, right? That's what it is, so people can't see. I mean, but there's no information in raised bumps, right? I mean, I joke with the youngsters. You're a teenager, you get a raised bump on your nose. There's no information in there. you got some acne.
Bad information.
Yeah. Whether it's computer code, zeros and ones, you got English language. That's sometimes written in ink. There's no information in ink, right? You got a bottle of ink. There's no information there.
The information in the message isn't contained in the ink.
Exactly. Morse code, sign language, smoke signals. There's no information in smoke unless you know particularly how to, arrange it in a certain way, and that always comes from an intelligent mind. Well, DNA is made of sugar, phosphates, and bases. If you take those basic elements, there is no information in that. I mean, there's no information in sugar, but I could grab a bag of sugar and I could pour it on the floor here and, hi, my name is Cal. If I arranged it, you'd be able to read something from the sugar.
Yeah, but then it's intelligence again that imposed information on the matter.
Right.
So we're back to creation. We're back to intelligent design.
That's right. DNA being the most sophisticated code anyone has ever seen. I mean, it's just staggering what they're finding out about DNA and codes.
That's right, yeah.
And you can go to creation.com. There are so many articles and just the sophistication in DNA. I really encourage you to get there.
And evolutionists will say as well that we're looking for, or not necessarily evolutionists, but the folks at SETI, the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, right? They know how to recognize information. If you see a non-random pattern in your radio telescope that you're receiving from the distant reaches of the universe,
so they're searching for alien life or signs of intelligent life out there.
They're looking for some non-random code,
right?
And when they find it, I mean, again, we're belaboring this a little bit here. We all recognize information.
Right.
And there are great attempts by atheists and evolutionists to say, no. What we have in the DNA there, that's not really information. You make the analogy between real information that we have, like in books that you read or Braille or whatever, to the biological code that all living things run on. Yeah, we can.
Information always comes from an intelligent mind. If DNA, this language, this code system, is the most sophisticated code we've ever seen, it must have come from the most sophisticated mind we can imagine, and that would be God. And if that challenges your viewpoint, I know it certainly did mine, not growing up as a Christian or a God believer at all. Here's a piece of scripture to encourage you. It's Proverbs 18:17. It says, "The first to present his case seems right, till another comes forward and questions him." And I would encourage you to take a look at some of the information we're being sold here. There is no God, science has disproven God, etc. And maybe re-examine it and find out, guess what? There is a God, He exists, and actually you believe in Him.